Well, Julie, the first item on our list is the constitutional amendment for gender equality. This was, for so many years, the Equal Rights Amendment has been defeated across the country, and here we are dealing with a bill that is the Equal Rights Amendment, except they have completely changed the words. So that I just think this piece of legislation throws women under the bus. But go ahead, Julie, and give us an update on that.
Okay, I will do that. And one of the questions is, so how does this affect children? Why is CPL involved? So that's a lot of, that's the reason we're involved.
Right.
But it affects way more than children. It'll have an impact on the whole culture if this were to pass. But essentially what this is under the auspices of women's rights, this bill would cement into our Constitution that gender identity may not in any way, in any situation, shall not be abridged or denied. They did that with one word. They changed sex to gender. And so they said the rights of shall not be denied or abridged on the basis of sex, not gender. So gender identity, as you know, is not an immutable characteristic like race or sex or disability or age. Gender identity is a feeling about who you are, and it is also sexual behavior. So what we're saying is that there can be no discrimination in any way for any purpose on the basis of how you're feeling and how you're acting that out. So there would be, it's a huge attack on the rights of girls and women. There'd be no constitutional right to distinguish between boys and girls in any place or in any way. It would not only affect bathrooms and locker rooms and showers and overnight stays for, schools, it would be the end of girls' sports competition.
And Julie, we don't have, I know there's not a definitive number out there, but the last I heard, there were 112 genders. And yet the legislature, when they debated this in the House on the floor, they had a hard time getting the author to define what gender meant. And they asked her about some of those genders, and she didn't know what they meant. And it was so concerning to hear the author of a bill not be able to define one of the key words in that bill. Has this been done has this kind of legislation passed in any other state?
Okay, well, there's only one other state that has passed an ERA that is on the basis of gender rather than sex, and that is Rhode Island. Rhode Island passed that amendment in 1986. Now, in 1986, it wasn't generally understood what that gender would be interpreted to mean gender identity. People took a vote on that. They don't even have they didn't have the background that we've all had trying to battle this everywhere. And so this, this is so puts us way ahead of the curve. I mean, we're ahead of California. We're ahead of New York. We're ahead of all the Eastern liberal states on this. It's radical to the core. The safety of girls and the privacy of girls and boys would be completely obliterated. Did you know that in the schools now, the girls are avoiding using the bathrooms when boys are allowed in the bathrooms? They don't want to be there. They're embarrassed. It's the last place they want to be. And you know how you can be harangued about, these things if you're a girl. So do you blame them? No, I don't blame them at all. So this is incredibly radical, and it would affect more than just girls. It would affect all women's sports. It would affect family definitions. It is litigation bar none. And if you'd like to see a more complete update from us, we put something out in writing, and you can find it on our Facebook page, CPL Action. And there are lengthy quotes in there from from some of the debate that was going on the House floor. So what the Republicans really stepped up to the plate. They recognized it for what it was. There have been 3 hearings. There have been hearings in 3 committees, and it passed the House on March 7th, which was last Thursday, on a party line vote. And the wonderful thing about this is that the Democrats, this is a fraud, an intentional fraud. They felt that if they call it an ERA, no one would dare vote against it, because it, who can vote against equal rights for women and get away with it? Well, they saw through that. So when the Republicans did, so they called them out on that, and all these things came out about, what this really is. They asked that they tried to pass an amendment changing the word gender to sex, and it was absolutely refused. The Democrats wouldn't take that, so they had the option. And one of the legislators pointed out, if you had changed that, it probably would have been a unanimous vote in support of this, but you don't want that. You want, and the author of the bill actually admitted, this is to be more inclusive. This is to include everybody, And so we can't use the word sex. So she was asked directly, how many people don't have a sex?
Right.
And he said, you can't get a more inclusive word than sex. Everyone has a sex. So when you're talking about being more inclusive, you're not just talking about including people. You're talking about attributing these things to certain people. And they happen to be people who have genders that no one can understand the meaning of. Nobody can define it. Nobody can understand the number. And I wanted to mention to you, by the way, that Gender Justice, which is a radical gender rights litigation firm who will do great with this, because that's endless litigation will be taking place over this, endless. And that's what they do. They are the ones behind the bill, and that came out in the testimony. So it's not really, they all talk about equal rights for women, and they talked about how the suffragists fought for this, and how we fought for hundreds of years to get the vote, and we this and that. And then, that's not what it's about.
Right.
That's not what it's about.
I know we have a clip from the testimony, but I don't know what clip that was. I just queued it up in case you want to play it from the House floor.
You have that clip?
I have it ready to go if you want to play it.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's just a few minutes long. So, okay, hang on here, folks. We'll play a clip. Is this from Representative Drazkowski? Julie, do you want to set up this clip?
I don't have it.
No, but can you describe it?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yes, he is testifying as to why this is not an equal rights amendment. It's not a women's issue. That people, are willing to go with you on this, but if it was what you say it is, it's why are you talking about women's rights when it's not really about women's rights? And I would like to tell you, in fact, that this bill, if it were to pass, would be it would just have this huge impact on the country, and people have to vote. Let me just say, it goes to the people as a constitutional amendment in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
However, if it says ERA, how are the people supposed to know what this really is? They're going to see ERA. Do you have it?
Yeah, let's if I can.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, we've had a lot of very compelling, moving discussions about equality, and I can tell you I agreed with every one of them. But members, that's not the bill before us. If we would have adopted Representative Scott's amendment, I suspect it might be a unanimous vote on this bill. And the discussion on the floor by nearly everybody that I've heard since the amendments have been done has been about equality between men and women, about the sex of the individual. Representative Scott's amendment. But Democrats, you voted against that. To preserve instead in the bill the language on gender, which still doesn't have a definition, a description, anything rooted in law to tell us what it is. We have lists of 112 of them that appear to be more about sexual behavior than whether they're man or a woman. So members in the majority, I think you are making very good arguments, but they're targeted at a bill that doesn't exist before us today. Instead, we have a bill that is brought together by what appears to be a special interest group. I was in a hearing and talking with Representative Kanish Padin as she presented her bill, and I saw past Representative May Quaid in the audience, and she was coaching her from a distance. And so I looked up and looked at, today. Representative May Quaid works for an organization called Gender Justice. By the way, they've got the same buttons on them on their website that I see on many members going around the House floor here tonight. And on their 990 form that nonprofit organizations have to file, a significant portion of their income is under their litigation program. Gender justice lawyers represent individuals or classes of people in targeted lawsuits designed to correct gender injustice and bring about systemic change. So no doubt, including the word gender in the bill, which again is not the target of the discussion here today, instead gives rise to the ability for organizations like this one to bring lawsuits that we don't even know yet what they're about, because we don't fully understand the definitions of gender in front of us. Not a single member that I asked to yield today knew about the definitions of gender, the 112 of them here that I have before me. So we hear the discussion quickly about let Minnesota decide. And this is about equality, and this is about fairness. And again, that's not what the bill is that's before us. We're putting forward a proposal that the people of Minnesota will not understand. We're putting forward a proposal that the body here has been collectively talking about for the last 2 hours, that they didn't hit the target on their debate because they were talking about something else. We're putting together a proposal that has no definition. And when we do that, and we put that in front of the voters of Minnesota, it turns into a deceptive measure for them. Members, let's not deceive Minnesotans because they won't know what this is. Let's be responsible. Let's vote no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
Well, I'll try to finish up real fast here on this because we're taking up most of the time on this, which is probably okay.
Important.
So we described, there was a fair amount of discussion about Title IX, and this really is the end of women's sports. And there were a number of situations there in the conversation where the author, Representative Kanish Padin, really threw women under the bus, as you mentioned, Michelle. She was asked, is it fair that the men who are saying they are women winning in the women's teams and crowding out any success that the women have? Is that fair? And she said it's a great opportunity for those boys. And so this is not about women's rights. It's not about anything that's good for women. Now let me tell you where it is right now. It did pass the House, so it goes to the Senate. There's a companion bill in the Senate, and there were 3 Republican authors who withdrew their names from that. Oh, I forgot to mention, another important part of the debate in the House was over the role of abortion in this ERA, because whenever an ERA has been passed in other states, that it has been successfully used in court to argue against any protections against abortion. And so some of the members just wouldn't vote for something that is empowering abortion to a greater degree in Minnesota and instituting it in constitutional law. So it goes to the Senate. So three of the three members who were Republican in the Senate who had signed on originally to the bill withdrew from that, and we were encouraged by that. So will this be heard in a Senate committee? You know, we're hoping that it won't. It's in the Judiciary Committee, and if it doesn't get heard, it won't move forward. Warren Limmer is the senator who is in charge of he's the chairman of that Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And so he's the one who will decide. Now, what we discovered after we sent out our update was that there is another bill in the Senate called SF 919. And this is a Republican-only ERA, and it is exactly like the one in the House, with the exception that they put language in to make it neutral on abortion, saying it won't affect anything regarding abortion. So then it is no longer, abortion is taken off the table as a controversial issue. However, it still uses the word gender. Mm-hmm. So we have a SF 919 in the Senate, which is authored only by Republicans, 5 Republicans, and I'll tell you who they are. They're Paul Anderson, Scott Jensen, Carla Nelson, Julie Rosen, and Rich Dreheim. And you know, we would ask you to respectfully, please, whenever you deal with people, be respectful. You know, ask them to remove themselves from the bill, tell them why, and you know, that's what they need to do. After all the testimony, ask them to listen to the testimony in the House, because it was a party line vote with one exception on the Republican side. Rod Hamilton voted you know, with the Democrats to pass this, which is a pretty serious matter. Mm-hmm. But 4 Democrats voted against it. And that is also a very interesting, very important part. So it's a bipartisan opposition, but almost partisan completely in passing it. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you one other thing about it before we leave, is that this bill, it has another year after this year to be heard in the Senate, because the legislative session is 2 years. It's called a biennium, and they meet, you know, a few months in both years. So next year they're still in the same biennium. So the House bill still sits there ready to be adopted by the Senate if they're willing. So it's still kind of hanging fire. So I think maybe, Michelle, you might want to say something about how if the DFL gain control of the Senate in 2020 and they keep the House, how will that affect this bill?
Yeah, all we need to do is look back to what happened in the bullying bill, the Safe Schools Act that passed in 2014. That bill was introduced in 2013, and then when the election occurred in the fall of 2013, the Republicans lost the House and the Senate, and with a Democrat governor, the whole legislature then was under Democrat rule. And so while the Republicans were able to stop that awful piece of legislation when they controlled the House and the Senate, once they lost it, it sailed right through, and there was nothing that anybody could do to stop it. With just a small majority in the Senate right now of Republicans, and the House being under Democrat control and us having a Democrat governor, if in 2020 Minnesota, the Republicans, who are the ones who have been stopping or at least preventing some of these bad bills from going forward, if they lose control of the House, I guarantee you this is going to be one of the first 5 bills that are introduced in the 2021 legislature. And there won't be anything that we can do at that point to stop it. So let's get involved now while we have a chance to stop it and to make sure that the legislature is controlled by people who will keep this at bay. I just want to finish off by thanking, at least on this piece of legislation, thanking Representative Drazkowski and the other legislators who spoke up on the Minnesota House floor in opposition to this piece of legislation. They deserve your thanks. And they led the charge, and what they did is really commendable.